So perhaps we can go ahead and kick it off here, and people will still trickle in. Um, we've got some intros and stuff to do before we dig into it, so might be good to go ahead and start off.
Perfect. So, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Guillermo Hernandez. I'm the Director of Latin American Operations at Adrianople Group. Today, we're happy to be hosting this discussion on the development of the development landscape of Latin America. Thank you all for being here. This event is being hosted by the Adrianople Group because we want to foster a conversation about the future in Latin America. More specifically, on the accelerated urban development and the changing dynamics of Latin America, and see different perspectives and opportunities on the opportunities and challenges in the region. Before I give the introduction for our esteemed speakers, I would like to briefly introduce the members of the Aeg team who will be assisting me over the course of this event today. First, there's Katarina Serlet. She's a sponsor for Adrianople Group. She'll be helping me lead the discussion and also co-hosting this conversation. Then there's Ryan Dixon. He's a research analyst at Ed. He will be managing technical aspects of the event. If you have any questions, make sure to hit him up. And then we have Preston Martin. He's the CEO of the Adrianople Group. He'll be giving you guys a quick rundown about what is the Adrianople Group and why we're doing this event.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. And welcome everybody to our conference today. Super excited to have you. Lots of familiar faces, lots of people who I've not met or spoke to before. So great to have a good mix there. So I'll give a little bit of a background about Adrianople Group and why we wanted to organize this event, set the stage a little bit before we introduce the speakers. So Adrianople Group is fundamentally a business intelligence company, and we work primarily with special economic zones across different regions, geographies. So not only in Latin America, but also Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe, and in researching and in the process of getting this business intelligence, we're identifying trends in these geographies, trends in how special economic zones and related fields are growing and evolving. And two of the biggest trends that we're looking at specifically within Latin America that I think are quite interesting and quite important for the future of urban development, the future of trade on this continent, is on the one hand, the special economic zones, special jurisdictions, or free zones that have driven the trade perspective, that have grown export processing, that have really unlocked a lot of economic opportunity across Latin America for some time, for several decades. And then on the other hand, we have this extreme growth of urban development. We have cities that are just bursting at the seams with people looking for opportunity and looking for ways to improve their lives. And so, it's really interesting to see how these two trends have evolved and how they've overlapped. And that's why we wanted to set up the event today, because we've got two experts, professionals in both of these fields that have been monitoring the situation, that have been working in the free zone environment and the urban development environment. And they can really offer a lot of perspective on how these things have been working, how they have been evolving, and where they might go going forward into the future. So we're really excited to have the two of them bring this unique perspective to bear and see how the free zones and special jurisdictions and that approach to economic development can overlap with the evolution of informal communities and cities, and how they can join and really unlock a lot of prosperity going forward into the future. So without further ado, I'll turn it back over to Guillermo, and he'll introduce Marco and Maria here, who will be giving the two presentations today. So thank you guys for joining, and really excited to get started.
All right. Just before I give the introductions to the speakers, I would like to do a quick schedule rundown of the event so everyone is on the same page. First, the speakers will be giving short presentations about 10 to 15 minutes about who they are, what the organization is doing. Then we'll be evolving into a moderated Q&A. If you guys, anyone has any questions, please feel free to send it on the chat box. And next, we'll be jumping into breakout sessions for a more in-depth discussion and networking, and try to make the event as productive as possible for everyone. All right, without further ado, I will start introducing our esteemed speakers. First, we have Maria Camila Moreno. Hello, Maria. She's the Executive Director of the ACFA, the Free Trade Zone Association of the Americas. She's an expert on supply chains and international trade. She holds a bachelor's degree in international business management from the University of Savannah in Colombia. She has a master's degree in international law and economics from the World Trade Institute at the University of Bern in Switzerland. She's also the co-author of The Transformation of China and Its Impacts for Colombia. With that being said, she is an expert and a top figure on the SEZ industry in Latin America. The ACFA is the South and Central America's largest economic zone professional organization. They recently launched a project called Relocate Latam, just trying to help businesses relocate to South and Central America. They provide critical services for free trade zones, like advisory on branding, training, studies, investment attraction, and they have partnership with key global organizations like the World FCO and the National Free Trade Association of North America. All right, next we got Marco Brandel. Marco is a managing partner at Utopia Rio. He is leading this project of Utopia, and he's based right now in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He's the founder of TEDx Rio as well. And he's also the country manager of Bloma Global in Brazil. He has years of experience working with the most disadvantaged communities across South America and trying to help them. Utopia is a B Corp that finds ways to help entrepreneurs in favelas around the world. Utopia is active today in Brazil, Nepal, Lagos, and Nigeria. City Labs is Utopia's venture program. In City Lab, they try to help entrepreneurs in disadvantaged communities, and they spend around 18 months providing them with the resources and mentoring them so the idea can flourish. All right, without further ado, I think we should start with the presentation. Maria, please welcome Camila. I'm very glad to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much for attending today, and thank you especially for the Adrianople group for this conversation. I wanted to be more a conversation, and the dynamic is very I find it really interesting. So feel free to interact me, to ask me as much questions as you want in any moment. So as Guillermo mentioned, I am the Executive Director of the Latin American, the Caribbean Free Trade Zone Association. We're based in Colombia, in Bogota, Colombia, and we represent 25 countries in the region, also including Spain, which is part of our association. And we have two main objectives. The first one is to promote the investment in our free trade zones. And the other one is to defend the mechanism of the free trade zone, because as you might have heard or know, or after this conversation, you will realize we have incentives, very strong incentives to attract investment. But at the same time, the Ministry of Finance, let's say they don't like us that much because we have this kind of incentive. So every time there's a reform, a fiscal reform, they want to raise the taxes of the free trade zones. So our work in the association is to show all the benefits of the free trade zones. and to promote the investment. So I'm going to do a very, very brief presentation. It's a 10-minute presentation to show you how important the free trade zones are in our economies. One of the biggest challenges that we face as free trade zones is that many people, they don't know what is a free trade zone, the benefits, or they have many bad ideas, or they think that, oh, but this is only for multinationals, oh, but I have to do a big investment. So the name free trade zone is mislead around the world. And I want to show you with figures, concrete figures, and after the discussion, I can answer you all the questions, but you will see how important is the impact of our free trade zones in the region. So, brief numbers. These are the numbers that I'm going to present you. The number of free trade zones, the exports, the investment, contribution to the GDP, salaries, and companies. The regime in the first free trade zone was based in Uruguay in 1923. Then it was followed by the US. You have your, in the US is called NAFTC, which is the foreign trade zones. And this is also very interesting. You will find many names of the free trade zones. You will find special economic zones, export processing zones, free trade zones, foreign trade zones, special economic zones for the development of the employment. So what we really define as a free trade zone is as a geographical area where the companies that are installed have benefits, they have incentives to be in this geographical area. That's the whole definition. Last year, I had the opportunity to be at the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development. We did a whole chapter on the World Investment Report on special economic zones. And we found out more than 80 definitions of the special economic zones. So that's why sometimes they ask me, or they feel, but where do you work? But it's a free zone, but is that like the one in Panama, like the Zona Libre de Colón, or is it the one like in China? Or, well, there's so many names and so many definitions that the common one is this that I'm telling you, the geographical area with benefits for the companies. We calculate almost 800 free trade zones in the region. And this is very special for you to know that in Latin America, especially in Colombia and Dominican Republic, we have the free trade zone itself, which is the industrial park where the companies install for manufacturing services or logistics. But in Colombia and Dominican Republic, there are also special economic zones or special free trade zone, where is a single company, a single enterprise is a free trade zone that receive the benefits. Why is that? Because, well, we believe that the bargain and the power of negotiation of these multinational and of these big companies is so big, and they can invest and create many jobs that they don't have to be inside a free trade zone, like an industrial park. So that's why we calculate 151 special economic zones in Dominican Republic, and in Colombia, we calculate 75. So if we calculate minus a single enterprise, there are around 400 special economic zones as the industrial parks now, of which 13,400 companies are within the free trade zones. You find many kinds of free trade zones: manufacturing, logistics, services. Actually, yesterday we were having a meeting with someone from the World Bank, and he had no idea that the free trade zones were also used for services, because for many years we have heard about the free trade zones in manufacturing, that they're in the urban areas, but the services one are in the that are in the rural areas, sorry, the manufacturing. But now with the services one are in the urban areas, because we create a lot of value-added employment for the call centers, IT, KPO, ITO services within the free trade zone. So in this 13,000, you find all kind of companies and also in all sectors, automobile, textile, data centers also, as any sector, plastics, any sector that you could imagine is within a free trade zone. Regarding the number of direct jobs, it's reaching almost 1 million direct jobs within the free trade zones. The Dominican Republic is very important with 1,700. And then Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. So these are really, really important creators of jobs. Just to give you a very, very special number, in Costa Rica, 6 out of every 10 new jobs created within the country is created for free zones. So sometimes that I was telling you regarding these discussions that we have with the Ministry of Finance, we say the free trade zones at the end is a good business for the country. And you can see it in the numbers. Which sector creates you these kind of figures and these kind of numbers? And also for exports and for international trade, of course, almost $38,000 million in exports. To give you a reference, this is what Colombia exports, the whole country exports. So as free trade zones joining, we are exporting as much as one country. And look these interesting figures as well. And this is why I sometimes cannot believe that the free trade zones have more known that people don't know about these free trade zones when you see these numbers. Aruba, 76% of the exports come from free trade zones. In Dominican Republic, 57% of the total exports of the country are made in free trade zones. In Costa Rica, 51%. In Honduras, 49%. In Uruguay, 31%. And in Panama, 16%. And regarding imports, of course, we import because, as you know, for global value chains, it's not that it's bad to import. It is good to import in the sense that you actually aggregate value and then export with some value added. So it's almost the same if you can see the dynamics. And of course, the number here is very high because it's Panama with Zona Libre de Colón, which we like to differentiate with the rest, because Panama, Zona Libre de Colón, and Iquique in Chile, they're more commercial, duty-free free zones. So it's only for importing and then re-exporting. They don't add any value. They don't have manufacturing companies, logistics, data centers. So we usually like to separate this figure from the general ones, because of course, 40,000, but 10,000 are from the Zona Libre de Colón. And the salaries is another interesting and very, very value added for us. A monthly average salary in a free trade zone of a worker in a free trade zone is $1,323. And you can see that countries like Uruguay, the average salary of an employee in the free trade zone is $3,354. This is monthly, sorry, it's not written there. I don't see, yeah, it's written monthly. And to give you a reference, the Economic Commission for Latin America calculates around 354 to 450 the monthly average of a worker in Latam. So you can see that we are really above the average. And also this is another discussion that we have with the Ministries of Industry and of Finance, is that all the employment in free trade zone does pay all the additional taxes as in the national territory. Unfortunately, studies made in Bangladesh or in the Philippines, where there have been cases occurred that, for example, I don't know if you remember, but in Bangladesh, one of these factories of textiles was burned with fire, and some employees were killed. And this is the reference that the International Labor Organization sticks in your mind. So for them, all the free trade zones are not complying with the labor laws, but it's in Latin America is the contrary. If you want a formal labor and job, you need to be in a free trade zone because we comply with everything that the law states. And here is the GDP contribution Costa Rica is almost 8% of the GDP of the countries made in free trade zones. In Panama, Zona Libre Colón is 5.4, in Curaçao 5, in Uruguay 4.8, in Dominican Republic, actually this needs to be updated because in a meeting last week, they told me that it raised to 7.9% as well, the same as Costa Rica. And Panama Pacifico, which is a very interesting case, is a very, very big area. It's a public-private partnership. And they even have an airport within the free trade zone. So it's a special economic zone with an airport, with universities, with housing, and with the manufacturing and industrial and services area, with the business centers for the services. So only one free trade zone contributes to almost 1.2% to the GDP of the country. And this is a number that we always discuss with our ministries. That is the contribution that the free trade zones give. Of course, we have incentives, but our argument is that if we didn't have those incentives, this investment wouldn't have come to our countries. So at the end, it's a good business for the economy. And we have done studies. These have been done in Costa Rica by Procomer, in Dominican Republic by Adozona, in Colombia by an independent consultant, and in El Salvador by the Camtex, which is the Association of Free Trade Zones. And it's for every dollar that the economy does not receive because of the incentive, mainly in corporate income tax, we are creating other kind of taxes on the salaries, on the formal salaries, on investments, on the old infrastructure of the free trade zones. So at the end, it's a good business for the economy. Here are, with only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries, we calculated with the statistics that we have, 1,800 million in investment for 2018. And in total, it has arrived to the free trade zones around $40,000 million of investment to our free trade zones in Latin America. So this is the brief that I wanted to give you with concrete figures. And we can start the discussion of the importance of the free trade zones in our region. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria, for that wonderful presentation. Those are figures that I didn't know. I mean, for being for me being in the industry and not knowing how impactful zones can be. I mean, in terms of Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, and Panama, those are really big numbers.
They are. That's why I always wonder why we're not more known. If we produce all these investment and employment and exports, and still we're not that known. But fortunately, that's what gives me this work that I love.
Camila, I was just about to ask you about this. Why you're not that known? Why is that?
I feel that for many, many years, we were stigmatized, especially by the multilateral organizations. Like I was mentioning, the labor organization just mentioned the case in Bangladesh, and then they stick with that case. For the OECD, until last year that I was in a working group with them and explained them that it was a good business and all the benefits, they just randomly did a formula where for every free trade zone that there was in the economy, it was like $3 of illicit trade. Just a formula that they create based on cases of a free trade zone in Malaysia. And then it was how free trade zones contribute to illicit trade, and all the negative things that you can ever imagine were in that study. So I had to sit down with them almost for 1 year, show them all the positive numbers. And if there were some, I'm not saying that they're all clean. Unfortunately, we know that in some parts of the world, these numbers are not good, or they're used for illicit trade. But how is it possible that for 1 or 2 cases in the world, then we're stigmatizing the whole free trade zones in our countries? So my job has been to talk to these multilateral organizations and tell them, okay, if there are some cases in some other parts of the world, please separate us because we're the good ones of the story. So do not mix us with everyone. It's like in the family, maybe there are 4 or 5 that are very good, and then someone is doing something wrong, and then they say, oh, that family, you know, is not a good reputation. No, it's not like this. It's just one that is creating the bad reputation that is affecting the rest of us. So yeah, my job, it has been to talk and with WTO, because they're the reference of the free trade zones around the world with the studies. And what happens is that once someone is sitting down and going to write something, if the only bibliography that they find is negative, so the result is going to be another negative. So our job, and that's why we're creating these statistics that was not done before, to create this sense of positive externalities within the free trade zones.
Fantastic. Sorry, was muted by a minute. All right. Thanks, Maria, for that wonderful presentation. Now, I would like to, shift towards Marco Brandel, who's the managing partner and director of Utopia Rio, and see, how all of these can blend to help on Latin America's development future. Marco, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Guillermo. Thank you, Camila. It was fantastic. Thank you, Aeg Group. It's for the opportunity to be here and share a bit about what we're doing. Just talk a bit about myself, so you guys have a better understanding on how did we get here, right? So my background is from advertising. For a few years, I worked in an agency for a few years in US, then moved to Barcelona to get a master's degree in advertising and communication strategies. And this was back in 2007, when Europe was just started to get in that economic crisis with the apex in 2008. So when I finished that, I moved back to Brazil. And I felt a lot the contrast with all this European architecture, the history going on there, right? And once in Rio, the lack of cultural initiatives down here. So at that moment, I got to know the TED through a DVD at the moment. So among 2 partners, we called TED in New York with the intention to bring TED to Brazil. I don't have to mention that they declined our proposition at that time. But when in 2009, they got back in touch with us, they had just created the TEDx licensing format. So we got the TEDx Rio license. Our goal, organizing TEDx Rio, was how can we improve Rio? How can we bring good stuff to Rio, right? So we know that one of the biggest challenges that we have here, we face here in Brazil, in Rio, is this huge contrast, a huge difference between social classes. So during almost like 10 years, organized those TEDx events, I had the opportunity to get in touch with many fantastic and very important social initiatives, and had the opportunity to help some of them. At some point, I almost got financially broken because I was donating most, if not all of my time to TEDx and those social initiatives. So I had to stop a bit and I started to think on how can I make my living out of working with these social initiatives? How can we help those, right? So of course, my first thought was to create an NGO, as you might think. But at that moment, a friend of mine, she just moved to Geneva to work for the World Economic Forum. And she got back and she called me and said, you have to know this guy, you must know this guy. So she introduced me Jonathan Hirsch, the Utopia founder. And it was a great connection for the very first moment. We had like many common thoughts. So for example, the initiatives should benefit the many, not only the few. We need to light touch solutions for the cities. And one very, very important is the favelas, the slums. They're not a problem, as a lot of people think. They're an asset. They're very creative. The resilience over there, like the human collaboration between people, the residents. So, and the list go on. And he invited me to be part of Utopia. In 2018, I had the honor, in April 2018, I had the honor to participate on such an amazing company. So what is Utopia? It's an urban innovation group building urban innovation ecosystems for emerging cities and with a big focus on their slums, right? And we even say that we work for the slums and their cities, right? And basically across Latin America, Africa, and Asia, as Guillermo mentioned before. And we're doing this by establishing this network of city labs and mega city fund based in global collaboration, using those city labs and slum labs to build those solutions. So, and they could be adapted, they could be taken to different cities, to different spaces, different locations, and make those solutions exponential. When I joined Utopia, Jonathan had just written an article for the World Economic Forum, and it was about the micro city. So micro city is a framework for a systematic urban reform. Right? So taking the seats and the softwares like hardware, right? Like the people and circular economy, lab grown food, and for microgrid energy and the OS, right? Like maybe a blockchain governance or something like that. How can we create this new framework of urban and make like those cities different, like more mature? In 2018, we even have signed an MOU with the mayor of Ulaanbaatar. This is the coldest capital in the world, in Mongolia, to implement this concept there. So Utopia is a global network of city labs. The ideas are global, but the need to adapt each reality, right? We have to engage local people to those initiatives make sense, right? So right now we're present in San Francisco, the mothership, in Kathmandu, Nepal, Lagos, Nigeria, and here in Rio, Brazil. So coming to our reality here, I believe there's no need to explain this crazy economic, political, and social crisis that Brazil is passing through right now. Tough times, economically and politically speaking. So our goal, of course, is to implement this framework, this micro city concept in some favelas, right? But this is a very bold goal. We even more taking the situation, the actual situation they're passing through. So instead of looking for funds and starting those city labs operation and going straight for the big and final goal, strategically, we choose to go to smaller initiatives like MVPs, right, to implement those initiatives. So from there, we start to create this authentic relationship with the residents of the communities and build some successful cases to show when we start to talking to future investors. For example, we had 3 ideas, selected 3 to start, right? The very first one is researching company, right? Once we started to work in Rocinha, one favela here in Rio, it was pretty amazing. We started looking for some numbers, and if we went to the city website, they showed us that there were like 60,000 people living there. But then we went to the energy company, and they were showing 150,000 people living there. And when we talked to the neighborhood association, they said that there are more than 250,000 people live there. So really, they don't have no clue how many people live there. And if they have no clue how many people live there, they have no idea how many those are women, how many are children, how many are unemployed, how many are starving, right? So how can you propose any kind of solution? You can propose anything basically, if you don't know what's up, what is the reality going on in that space. So the research company would be very important. Another one, another big problem that we have here in the communities are the garbage, like the waste, right? The managing, or the lack of managing waste in those communities. Right? So how can we work on that? So we started to think about like a recycling plastic plant. It doesn't have to be a huge one, but at least a small one that we could create beautiful products we want to avoid the PD sale, right? It's very common, I think, like in the communities, but also when we travel around, when you're going to some places, you have like those people selling sometimes cheap products, and you look at that and say, yeah, you buy that, but you don't even take it. Like, yeah, sell to someone else. You're not even buying the product. You're helping the person, right? So we avoid that. So how can we do that? We have to design. We have to create like beautiful products. People have to will to go back there and buy another one, right? So we have to design it on that. And the third one, which is I would say that is very important one, is the Slum Lab, right? Would be the space that could host those initiatives, and even other entrepreneurs could join us and create this very living and living space, this a space that creativity and get together, and people started to designing some other solutions from there. So as we mentioned before, we understand to have a really authentic initiative, we must work with the local people. So since we focus in Rocinha, which is one of the largest favelas in Latin America, so we started to get closer to a few initiatives, some key people that were already willing to help other residents, but they were not involved with politics, not illicit activities, right? So we have to gain their trust before we start to proposing anything there. So in this meantime, Dori was developing and launching the first city lab in Kathmandu, and Emmanuel in Lagos had just organized a mega city prize with 8 winners in different businesses and urban solutions. I guess they're down here. So in the breakout rooms, we can talk a little further on those initiatives. They can explain much better than I can. So when the pandemic hit, we had this as the rest of the world to pause for a bit and re-understand what's this new moment. We have to figure out how to act from there, right? One of the initiatives that we were closing, though, those key people that we were trying we were getting closer at the moment, was an NGO focusing on giving basic food for some other people more socially vulnerable. And when we just show a bit, when we start to talk to them, they were attending like 30 families. And right before the COVID, they were supporting 150 families. And during the apex of the crisis, they were able to distribute more than 2,000 basic supply kits, both food and hygiene per week. So now that we have this new normal, new normal, if you can say it's something normal, being shaped, and the numbers start to stabilize, the situation started to get somewhere. So we have to start to rethink on how to get back to our core mission, which is to promote entrepreneurship, social businesses, and with that, create a wealthy ecosystem to grow the local economy, in these cases, the favelas. Right? So how do we plan to do that? So we getting back on the started projects, right? Like the research company, the recycling plant, the slum lab, and getting back to focus on those urban entrepreneurs and design entrepreneurships and other innovations. We're looking to establish the city lab platform for this and the prior projects that can be focused on both the favelas and the formal city, looking at how Rocinha could become this micro city, right? And this is something that I want to bring afterwards to talk to Camila a little deeper. And beside that, we're about to launch an Urban Innovation Challenge across 15 emerging cities in Latin America, Asia, and Africa. And with that, a virtual accelerator program, just like we did in Lagos and we are doing in Kathmandu. Always keeping in mind to make the best for the many, not only for the few. Negotiations with the mayor of Ulaanbaatar, which just had a few setbacks, have just retook traction to resume the implementation of the macro city concept there. So I guess this is it. I don't want to take longer on this. I'm really looking forward to talk, to have these conversations, to Q&As, and Looking forward to hear from you guys. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for that introduction to what Utopia does, Marco. As a Latin American person, I'm glad to know that there's people and B Corps and different teams out there trying to find solutions for challenges of the region. The slums or informal communities are a huge challenge in the region. And just to put an ending note on Marco's presentation, I live in Santiago de Chile right now. It is an 8 million person city. It's a very big city, but it used to be very small. Actually, Santiago used to be the center district of the city, and most of the city actually developed as informal communities. Huechuraba at the north, Puente Alto at the south of Santiago are probably the biggest districts of Santiago de Chile, and in terms of population. And they originally started as informal communities. So I would like to remark that there's a blending between the informal communities and the city. It's one big cell. It's one big system that collaborates and work with each other. So yeah, I'm really glad to know that there's people trying to find solutions for these challenges. All right, I will pass. Let's say I will shift to Katerina, and I think we should be good to start a moderated Q&A. If any of the participants have any questions, please send it over the chat, and we'll try to answer them. Thanks again, Marco.
Thanks very much to you both. Those two presentations in different ways were very uplifting, and definitely brought a lot of hope. And we usually are just inundated constantly with negativity from all media. So I really appreciate seeing all those statistics. Those are statistics that I hadn't seen before, Camila, and they're just great. Everyone in the chat is asking, can I have Camila's presentation? I really want the file for that. I want to look those numbers up and quote them again. So that's awesome. If you're willing to share that with us, please do so, and we can share it with all the attendees.
Of course, of course. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah, and Marco, the approach that Utopia, I mean, you know that I'm a big fan of you guys, but the approach that Utopia is taking, I think is so wonderful. And like Guillermo mentioned, about understanding Chile and Santiago, it's something that's already happening. And the way that you describe how there's all these uncounted people, this informal life of citizens is real, and figuring out ways to formalize in some way, whether it's through entrepreneurship and through wealth growth, or maybe we can find some ways with special jurisdictions soon to create some micro cities. All those are really interesting ideas for me. So looking forward to getting started with the discussion today. Thanks so much to you both. Okay, to get started, yeah. So first, I just want to say, if you are interested in asking of the speakers personally, you can either use the reaction or the raise hand feature in Zoom. And if you're having any questions about that, feel free to private message Ryan or ask in the chat about how you do that. Or raise, if you want to go on video and raise that way, that's fine as well.
Because I don't find the thing here, the virtual hand, I didn't find it. That's why I'm doing this. I would like to answer the question of James, because I think it's very, very interesting, and it brings different topics. He's asking, where are the typical jobs being created in Costa Rica? Are they growing whole new industries that they didn't have before? I assume a lot of the remaining 4 out of 10 are tourist sector. Well, I don't have that detail of if the 4 out of 10 are touristic, but for sure, because they're having a tremendous crisis right now, because their economy relies on tourism right now. And the thing that I want to highlight that not only happened in Costa Rica, but also in Dominican Republic, is that in 10 years, they completely changed the production, the manufacturing, that was the sectors of manufacturing that was in their countries. Costa Rica was textile for a long time. Then they moved with the investment of Intel, of the company of Intel, which was created in a very, very big free trade zone. And for many years, they specialized on everything related for Intel. It was the biggest cluster in Latin America. But Intel, unfortunately, they left back to China, but they left a very huge capacity in Costa Rica, which allows them to do medical devices right now. So 8 out of the 24 biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world are installed in Costa Rica. Actually, for your reference, there is a free trade zone in Costa Rica called Coyol that they only receive the biggest 500 of the companies of the Fortune 500 to be within their free trade zone. So they completely changed from textile, then for Intel and electric components to medical devices, and also for the services. Right now they're in the call centers, but they're upgrading in more business processing, BPO, business processing outsourcing, and also for software. And the last time I heard, they're creating people for cybersecurity. So they're upgrading the skill. So it's a really, really interesting case how free trade zones actually help them to completely shift from a textile, low value added labor force to a high value added labor force. So I wanted to answer that question because I think it's very important.
Excellent. Yeah, you touched on this a little bit in your presentation, Camila, on the service-based economy and how many zones people think about manufacturing and zones, and whenever they think of free zones, it's either import export or just some kind of a manufacturing. But there's a lot of this business process offshoring and just call centers and service-based things that people aren't usually thinking of. So that's awesome to clarify.
Yeah, just to give you, sorry, I don't want to take Marco that much time from my answer, but for your reference, in Uruguay, the World Trade Center itself, the World Trade Center of the World Trade Center Association, it's a free trade zone in Uruguay, dedicated 100% for services, offshore services, and big companies do all the back office there. They have Nike, they have Adidas, they have McDonald's. So many US companies are there to do all the outsource back office in a free trade zone, which is a building that is a World Trade Center. So the free trade zones at the end is a figure that you can create, adjust according to your needs.
If I can jump in.
Please.
My provocation on that is, let me step back one bit. Another idea that we had some time ago with this main concern of how can we raise the economy within the communities, the favelas, was maybe to create a currency, right? This is those currencies that they have been around the world, they have been going some good places, and you have some good returns of that, right? But when you explain a little bit about those free zones, those special economic zones, or whatever 9 names that they call it, and how do you feel? How in your experience do you see that implemented in a community? I know this is going to be a bit different than that you're used to see, but how do that? Let's brainstorm here. If
you mean for a new currency within the free trade zone, like fintech, like a fintech idea?
No. Yeah, my idea was to create that to raise and increase the economy within the community. But maybe we don't even need that. Right? If we just make those that community that like a small city, right? We're talking about 250,000 people. If we're bringing Rocinha to the as an example, we have this small city there. If we make that city a special economic zone, how do you think that the economy within would happen? And do you think like that?
Well, I believe that a good company within a free trade zone with a cluster can really change the dynamic of the city or of the town. To give you an example, in Bogota Free Trade Zone is it is in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Bogota. They created this free trade zone, which right now employs 22,000 direct employees, and it's the securest place in Bogota. So because of the fence and everything, so they employ almost 15% of the people around this neighborhood and other neighborhoods, of course. It's a very secure place, but they have a really high, and I bring your point, Marco, they have a really high sense of social responsibility. So of course you can have the company and create employment, but if from the general manager, they don't have this social responsibility, they will not create positive externalities. And what is really nice about this example is that they have a university within the free trade zone to create building capacity, skills, upgrade skills. And this university can also be used by the families of the employees. So it's very nice, it's very nice. So sometimes big companies are questioned, like, so you only want like the money and you want the profit and everything. But I do believe, and after COVID, I really think that after COVID, we really need to think about the free trade zones with all the sustainable, circular economy, positive externalities to the community, higher salaries, protect obviously the people from COVID, and the protocols of biosecurity were really rapidly installed in the free trade zones because of the fence. So coming inside and outside, and that's one of the answers that I wanted to raise from the discussion that we had in the Word presentation on the other, is that one of the things that we realized is that with the COVID, the free trade zones were able to respond very quickly, to adapt very quickly, especially for the biosecurity protocols. And the companies of the textiles that were producing for Zara, they start creating the mask and the things for biosecurity. And the free trade zone, special free trade zone that we have in Bogota for General Motors, they stopped creating, manufacturing the cars, and they started repairing the respirators. So we realized that free trade zones they're really, really easy to adapt for new realities, for risk management. And well, I'm sorry that I'm answering like 3 questions at the same time. But Marco, I do think that a free trade zone can definitely change the scope of a neighborhood, and especially in our countries that are usually low income neighbors. Well, with a good management, they can do the difference.
I want to just jump in quickly. Camila, you describe this very short period of time for the turnaround that zones were able to take in Latin America to implement policies when all the other economies were shut down. I mean, is this like many weeks we're talking here? I know the number from your podcast with Guillermo, but how long was it? How long was it, you know, before things started to open in the free zones as opposed to these totally locked down economies?
Yeah, well, the good thing was that we, well, depends on the economy, of course, but as I mentioned in Costa Rica, the pharmaceutical sector is very big, so they never closed. Mm-hmm. The call centers and the services really had to adapt very fast, because when you're in a free trade zone, you're not able to, import all your equipment that you have for the call center outside of the free trade zone. So it took in Costa Rica for the services around 3 months, same that in Uruguay, around 3 months, in order to do a new decree to be able to do home office, because it was not allowed. But the logistic companies, the pharmaceutical companies, and the textiles companies, and the food industry continue working. So in Colombia, it was around 40% of the companies within the free trade zone were still working. Meanwhile, the whole economy was locked down. And it depends, of course, on the economy. In Uruguay, they never closed, because in Uruguay they had an intelligent confinamiento, confirmó, lockdown, like ¿cómo?
Quarantine or lockdown?
Yeah, quarantine, yeah. They had an intelligent quarantine, which is your own responsibility. So they never closed. Fortunately.
Okay. That's such a big contrast from the, yeah, yes.
And that's a good point, Katrina, because Katrina or Katarina? Katarina.
Cat works great.
Okay. For example, and Marco, I bring you this to you. There's one free trade zone, which is the Zona Franca de Manaus. Their goal is to manufacture mainly bicycles and two-wheel vehicles. And there's an export processing zone in Ceará, which is CP Ceará. And they have a siderurgic company. So in these lockdowns, what happened is that we really start thinking about what kind of sectors we want to attract to our free trade zones. So in a case of lockdown or that the economy closed, we can continue producing, and that's services, food industry, and pharmaceutical. That's one of the main conclusions. But unfortunately, in Brazil, because they don't have this system, well, you can live without a siderurgical, and you can right now live without the bicycle. Of course, they will potentialize after COVID. But it's many questions that rise of how should we focus our sectors within the free trade zone, and the economies that didn't have, there was a lockdown and they cannot install very easily the protocols of biosecurity. So they were just closed down. So it brings very many ideas that the countries that do not have, oh, maybe it's a good idea to have.
Thanks for expanding on this. I want to get back to the chat questions because we do have quite a few coming in, and that's really great to see. If anyone wants to ask questions directly, again, either go off, turn your videos on and give us a wave, or use the notification feature so that we can see you in the chat.
You turn your video on and ask questions. You're more than welcome.
Yes. Oh, please do. Please do. We really, one thing we're all missing this year is getting to have these conversations in person. So this is really the best we can do. I know it's not the same, but going off of mute and saying hello and participating that way really is awesome. So we're actually lucky in many ways because all over the world, we're all getting to participate and have this conversation today. So let's jump into some more audience questions. This one is from Marco from Jay. He says, thanks so much for sharing this update. I've previously heard Emmanuel from Utopia Lagos discuss how microcities are highly emergent organisms, and they need to be approached with an orientation towards adaptability, not just planning. What's an example of how you all have designed for adaptability in your innovation programs in Rio?
Well, thanks for
answering that, Marco. Hi.
Hi, Jay. Thank you for asking. Well, I think that this adaptability is again, if we bring our concept from wherever we are, trying to take some solution to a community, that might not work because we're seeing with our lenses, we're seeing with our reality, right? So we have to get them involved. What we understand, we believe is we bring like network, we bring a formal education, we bring that to make those initiatives stronger and not the opposite, right? Because if you go to Rocinha, there are, I would say, like a couple, if not more than that, a few hundreds of NGOs trying to do something to them, right? But that's not what we want. How can we help them to thrive? I think this is our way to adapt that, right? Because again, this is how our authentic project coming up. So this is exactly what we try to do, gathering and involving people from local people to that, right? But let's say, for example, here in Brazil, we have this crazy relationship between the three spheres, right? Like we have the government here, we have the social, the social society here, the social society here, the people, and then we have the private initiative. The government want to do projects and things to the people, right? So from Brasilia, they think, oh, let's make this happen. and they do that. But that's not what the people want. People want some other things. So the people are not happy because they don't get what they want, and the government is not happy because it don't get recognized because he has done something. And that to do that, the government go to the private initiative, which is make a much more expensive that whole project. So this is a three spheres unhappy with one movement. Because of what? Because we don't talk to people. We don't understand that, because this is a schizophrenic conversation between those ideas. So this is exactly what to try to avoid. So we go there, we see what's up, what people are doing. And from there, we get lucky. Let's make this better. Let's make this stronger and more sustainable financially, more technological, stronger, so you can thrive, right? So this is the idea. This is how we think we could face this adaptability, because they're so creative. You know, the people from the communities, they're very, very creative. They do things. They do a lot of things. So if we just help them with the network, the fundings, the technology, whatever we can bring to them, that's the way we believe that this is the way to go there.
Thank you, Mark. I totally appreciate that. What do you do to actually see the signal, right? Like to see some of those signals about what are the things that are really the right ones that sort of need your formal education, the network, the financing, the technology that you bring in. What are you looking for?
I think that there's no recipe for that. We go talking and see. Well, there's people saying that the necessity is the mother of the creativity, right? So in a low-income community, you believe that like they need a lot of things. So you can believe how creative they are. So it's just a matter of looking at what they're doing and try to bring in something else. Of course, there are some initiatives. For example, a daycare. It's hard to make a daycare to be profitable, right? So we have to find what? We have to create another thing that somehow can subside the daycare. So we have to create this ecosystem. It's not as simple. It's not one solution. You have to create a systemic solution to make things to fit and support each other.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Great question. Okay, and thanks, Jay, for participating with your video and audio. That's awesome. On that, I actually want to jump. I see Alex has asked an interesting question that hopefully will spark some conversation between Marco and Camila a bit further. Alex, do you mind asking it yourself, since I see you're on video anyways?
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
So I was just curious about, because as long as I understood, Camila has been doing this in such different environments around Latin America. And I was just worried about, is there any kind of place that special economic zone has been implemented as hard as the favelas? Because as long as I understood, you told that in Colombia they have some kind of difficulties because of the dangerous place and stuff like this. But the problems we deal in favelas, especially here in Rio, is that they are almost like the forgotten people. Like the public service doesn't pay attention on anything there. And I was curious about what is your thoughts, or what is Marco's also thoughts on how to try to implement something that big in those places?
Yeah, it's a it's a really, really good question. And the case that I mentioned in Bogota, it's very particular because it was the free trade zone aside, which at the end consumed the rest of the neighborhood. So it was not something that the neighborhood and then they got installed. It was a very big area next to this neighborhood, and then they created all this ecosystem. So I find very difficult, and well, of course, Marco will complement, but from my side, it's very difficult just to change a neighborhood just because we are going to create a free trade zone or a special area there. I find it really difficult. It was something that Mexico wanted to do with the south of Mexico because the north is very developed, but the south is not very developed. So with the President Peña Nieto, they created the special economic zones because they wanted to create more development on the south. What happened when they realized the kind of companies that will invest in those areas? They realized they didn't have the labor force and the skills of the labor force. So they had to create all these skills before coming with the investment. At the end, what happened was that after 4 years of creating the law and analyzing and which kind of sectors and spending huge amount of money, Peña Nieto ran out of president. López Obrador came to presidency and he said like, what? I don't like this. And 4 years of work, he just said like, this is not gonna work. This is not of my interest, and he threw it away. So in this policy making, I've seen many cases that they want to use the free trade zones in order to upgrade some cities or some neighborhoods, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy because if you don't have the public sector, the public services, if you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have the skills of the people, the companies will not arrive. So it's more like on the other way. The company and then create all this cluster, but not, you have the city and then the company, it will create a shock in the economy and with the people. But Marco, this is a really good discussion. What do you think? Because it's my perspective, but I might be wrong.
Well, I think it's something different. And again, as we're talking to Jay, it might not be exactly the same format that you might you have and you're used to, but maybe to design something, right? Like this is something that I wanted to ask you is like how does those economic zones, they have a due date or something like that, or it's for good? Like once that space is a economic zone, it's for good, because
they have a what? Sorry.
It's a date at some point they come back to the sea.
An expiration date.
Expiration date.
Yeah. The thing is that most of them will expire and then they renew the license. So it's 30, in Colombia it's 30 years plus 30 more years. In Dominican Republic it's 15, and every 15 years they see how the free trade zone is doing and if it's compliant with everything, and they will give it 15 more years with no limit of time. So right now the regime has 50 years. In Cuba, for example, is for 90 years. So we still will have, at least meanwhile I live, there will be free trade zone.
Hey, so Marco, Maria, I have a possible idea that might sort of reconcile. So it's very clear that there's obviously problems with implementing traditional FDI-driven manufacturing and export-driven like zones in economically distressed areas to revive the economy. It's very clear that that poses a lot of problems and generates a lot of opposition. What about a different type of economic zone? Because in these informal communities, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs do things in the black market. They might have an unlicensed food stand. They might have an unlicensed hair parlor. And what it means if it's unlicensed is that although the laws aren't enforced, it means that the police can at any time crack down. It means that they can't go to a bank and get loans. It means that they cannot benefit from the various programs that help support entrepreneurs. So what about taking a favela or an economically distressed area, and instead of focusing on a sort of top-down approach for FDI, and I don't really know if this has been tried, simply formalizing the de facto rules that already exist and using this as a sort of mechanism to generate economic activity bottom up from the people who are already doing things. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Yeah,
that's exactly what we're thinking. Like, again, when I don't know if I made myself clear, when I mentioned that we're trying to create a currency in there, it was exactly this, because there are a lot of transactions within the community already, right? So how can we maintain that money in the community? So one idea was to create this currency, but if we can have this space over there, if we can have this special demonstration economic, I don't know, this new zone in there, that we can have those transactions and we don't have, for example, pay any taxes within the community. So the money comes in and the money stay in, and that will make the economy raise in there. Like it's going to increase the economy. And once increased, they are going to be able to construct and maintain themselves, to create like schools, daycares, and some other clinics and whatever else they need, right? I mean, so again, you create an independent zone, at least for a while. And that's why I asked you about the expiration date, because of course, I don't think like Rio would give up on hosting a space, right, for good. But if we can have like, I would say like 15 years or 30 years, and we can create this movement in there, we raise the economy so people get better food, can better education, get better living, right? So after 30 years, how would that favela looks like, right? And then we can have create like a process to get that back to the outside city, right? So how can we get Rocinha back to Texas? I don't know. This is, I think it's interesting, and of course there's a lot to talk. I guess.
Basically create a way to merge the ecosystem that exists via sort of technology and understanding how their ecosystem currently is functioning, so that way it can merge back with the city at large.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And creating sort of maybe almost looking at it like a charter city that's in process, and how to look at their rules the way that they already are doing things, and say that these informal systems and infrastructures just need to be supported by some legal rule set that doesn't discount what they've been doing, but because they haven't had more access, they may not know how to transition back into the regulated system completely. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a functioning ecosystem. It just, there's no way to move between the two yet. So regulating it based upon what it is can create that path where they can at least then move between the two and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Awesome, guys. So
let's make it.
Yeah. So I actually, there's one audience question that I definitely want to touch on, and then we'll think about moving to breakout rooms if there's not any other big audience questions. And for that, you know, we invite Marco and Camila to join us, but I know you guys are busy, so if you have other things that you need to get to today, don't feel that you need to stay with us. It's okay. But
I'll stay until 11:45 if that's
okay. Yeah, excellent. So the last question then, before we start the breakout rooms, and before we start, I'll explain how this will work more in detail. But the last question on this is also on just a kind of potentially funny or different type of zone because of its autonomy, the levels of autonomy. And generally across Latin America, we see a fairly typical model of zone law. Daniel asks, how are Honduras' new charter cities, the ZEs, considered SEZs? Or excuse me, are they considered SEZs, as they have legal autonomy too, not just fiscal incentives? What are some potential benefits and challenges of ZEs? So thinking about, what types of challenges can come from having more autonomy and having different models for SEZs, as we were just discussing potentials for what the favelas could be, should they be microcities?
Well, I would jump in really quick because I think Camila can go a lot deeper.
Go ahead.
One benefit I see, as Camila was mentioning, like about the COVID crisis, is that you have a very quick response for wherever it is. So it is basically an MVP process, right? Of course, it's completely different if you have to change the whole Rio laws and the state of Rio and the federal laws. So, but if you have a smaller place, I think you can switch quickly from one to other. So you can try much faster what works, right? I mean, bringing again to the question from Jay, like how can we adapt that quick, right? So I think if you have a smaller space and some autonomy on that, I think that you can change quicker, faster and take different directions.
All right, thank you for that answer. Yes, so I think that generally with zones, and that's why I thought it was great that Camila during her talk re-explained that there's all these different definitions and reconciling what specifically a zone is. That's why the World Bank and as Camila was saying, just think about that, the geographic area. And some of those things may be changing, the specific types of phrasing used for the definition and understanding of it being just this geographic area because of COVID and the work from home policies coming from that. So this will be an interesting thing to see how it will play out. In terms of benefits, I think, and challenges, like was posted in the chat, challenges more broadly, you'll be able to explore on the Charter City's website for the legal autonomy side of that question. But as Thibaut mentions, I think you responded to either Daniel or Joyce. If either of you guys want to jump in and ask the question a little bit differently, feel free to. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to Francisco and then onto the breakout rooms. But that Charter Cities podcast episode will probably give you some more context on and texture on the discussion about the ZAs from I think the perspective that you guys are asking. But feel free to jump in and clarify otherwise.
Yeah, the SEZ, it has been very polemic. I actually know someone that was working for the law and all the reforms because I know they wanted to do something completely different, having their own police, having their own currency. Well, they wanted to do many things, but it has not been easy to pass the law on the Congress. It's stuck. And the last thing that I've heard, and actually they sent me a video, they said that they wanted to do in Ratan, which is more a touristic place, and it's a whole discussion. So it's a very controversial topic that has not moved forward. And that I think that for at least, meanwhile we have COVID and other issues, it will not move any further.
Yeah, okay. So interesting to hear what the, I think the real professional organization opinion of AZFA's understanding of the ZAs currently. That's good to know. We only really hear it being talked about on places like the Charter Cities Institute puts out some research, but a lot of it for a while has been quite theoretical. I know there are some projects moving forward now, but again, it's still early. So
yeah,
always good.
You're doing a lot of noise and trying to move forward, but I know from the government perspective that they don't want to move. And there's a lot of pressure also from the free trade zones that are actually right now working on Honduras, because at the end it's going to be competition. So they have to go further many steps, the competition, the labor unions, the Congress, and the ones that they wanted to implement. I know that has not been with the social community, as Marco knows. The social community has not been approved this incentive.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. I think that I see Francisco's asking you questions. How are both organizations interacting and thinking about opportunity zones and SEZ's focus on? I think that this was more or less covered throughout the conversation, but maybe we can just have, if you guys see Francisco's questions, how are both organizations interacting and thinking about opportunity zones and SEZs focused on relief to economically distressed urban communities? So if you guys have a short closing remark on that, then please share it and we'll switch to breakout rooms.
To be honest, I don't know much about opportunity zones. So I'm also learning and I have to check back to give you an answer. I've heard about them, but I haven't seen them into detail.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, and again, I think we have an expert about SEZs here, and I think we don't have any case about like how can we implement that concept. I think this is a brainstorm that to start to have here. So Yeah, I don't. I think I would put some more energy on this. Try to think a little further on that. Of course, maybe not to that big community. Maybe get a smaller one and try to do that. But hopefully, in a few years, I can answer you better.
Awesome. All right. So let's do either of you have any closing remarks? We're going to split up into about 2 groups and focus on some guided discussions and hopefully invite everyone to participate in those. A little bit more intimate than a 40-person Zoom for now.
And just to thank you, all of you. And this is a very good scenario to show you all the advantages of the free zones. As I mentioned, they're unknown. So we're still all learning, and I learn from free trade zones every day. Someone was mentioning why so difficult, and he said, well, because there are many countries with different regulations, and that's completely true. And within the association is 25 countries, so every day I continue learning. And the thing is that the free trade zones are pilots. So I really think that this can be, as Marco was mentioning, a pilot for something that has not been done before, and to do the brainstorming of what it requires for the implementation and for the regulation of favelas, free trade zone, or how to scope in with a different regulatory scheme that will really improve the way of life in the favelas. So I'm very happy to have joined today, and thank you all to be here and hearing about the free trade zones in my region.
Yeah, same here. I would love to thank you all for the opportunity to talk a bit about Utopia, what we have been doing here. Thank you very much, Camila. It was really interesting to dive a little deeper on that, and I'm looking forward to hear even more from that. So we're in contact, so hopefully we talk more. And thank you all for being here and joining us in this conversation. At least I enjoyed it very much. Thank you, Aeg, for making this possible.
Thank you both so much for joining.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you to everyone for joining. Okay. So and thank you very much to our 2 speakers. Camila, I know you only have about 15 minutes left, so I'll try and get us quickly moving into the breakout room so we can still have some deeper conversation there. So there's going to be 2 breakout rooms. It'll be randomly assigned, but there will be AG people sort of dispersed throughout to help things run smoothly. Ryan is going to be, he needs to be made the full meeting host if he's not already. He needs to be made the full meeting host so that he can begin the breakout rooms and get us started. You'll see, I think Ryan will explain, but you guys will see a pop-up window that will say you have been assigned to a breakout room, and you just click the blue button. If you lose that screen, or if you can't find the pop-up, then there's a breakout rooms. It's like 4 squares in a square next to some of the options at the bottom of your Zoom window, and click that if you can't find your pop-up. Okay, so looking forward to seeing you guys in the breakout rooms, and I don't know who will be there, but we will have a good mix, I'm sure. All right, so keep an eye out for your, all right, I just got mine.
Yep, I started the rooms now, and the window.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, see you guys in there. Thank you.